Harpreet, welcome. Thankfully, you finally got Homeland Security to get you your visa. And it's taken 3 weeks, and he's missed, I think, 4 concerts in America. But
Unfortunately, yeah.
absolutely amazing to have you here today, and best wishes for the rest of the tour. Navdeep, your grandfather was unlettered.
Yeah, I mean, he had a difficult childhood. He was orphaned at the age of 10. He couldn't really complete his schooling, didn't go beyond 4th grade in school, and yet...
Third pass, fourth fail, or fourth pass?
The joke in the family that he used to say was that you could call me 4th pass or 5th fail, take your pick. But that didn't deter him from producing 59 books, including 38 novels, and being called the father of the Punjabi novel.
Absolutely. Were you aware of what your grandfather stood for when you were kids playing around his charpai in Preetnagar?
I'm afraid not. I think ours was a fairly innocent childhood, and because he passed when I was 12, our childhood memories really are of going to our village and sitting around him and listening to stories. And generally watching this very genial, very saintly figure, always dressed in a white turban, white kurta pajama. And he'd go for walks, and sometimes we'd accompany him, and he'd always have a bunch of candies in his pocket to give to any kid that he would see on the way. But I think the intellectual understanding of what he stood for, his values, his principles, maybe some stuff that we might hopefully have imbibed, really came to me through the process of translating his books.
And you were in Washington when some of this actually sunk home.
Yeah, I think I must give that credit to the United States. I was posted at the embassy in Washington between 1993 and 97. And 97 was the year that his centenary was being celebrated in India. Prime Minister Inder Gujral was in charge then, and he was a great fan of my grandfather's books, and he did this wonderful event at what was then called 7 Racecourse Road to really celebrate the centenary, release a first day cover, a postage stamp, and all that. And somewhere that news traveled to the diaspora, to the Punjabi diaspora in particular in the US, along with this revelation that one young first secretary at the Indian embassy happened to be Nanak Singh's grandson. And suddenly, Mani and I found that we were getting invited to Miami, to Chicago, to LA for events that were being organized by the Punjabi diaspora to celebrate Nanak Singh. And it was quite stunning for me to meet particularly older women who would take my hand and say, with a degree of reverence that I was utterly unprepared for, and they'd say, "Bete, aapko nahi pata, you don't know, we learnt Punjabi from his novels, or we learnt Punjabi so that we could read his novels." That was the kind of impact that he had had on the consciousness of a generation. And I guess we as members of his family were fairly innocent of that.
You talked about him in his white starch pagri and kurta, but he wasn't born a Sikh.
So he was born into a Hindu family. His name was Hansraj when he was born. His father's name was Bahadur Chand Suri. And there was a combination of circumstances that took him first from Jhelum, where he was born, to Peshawar. And in Peshawar, he describes in his own autobiography, which was published in 1949, his teenage years and how, the fact that he had some flair for music, some flair for poetry, actually got him into bad company. And he became like an entertainer for a rowdy bunch of well-to-do kids. And it wasn't until he came under the wing of this very pious priest at the Gurdwara in Peshawar that he decided that he wanted to apply his musical talent to singing hymns from the Guru Granth Sahib. He became part of the Jatha, as it was called, to sing Kirtan, and then converted to Sikhism and the name he took was Nanak Singh, and true to the Sikh faith, he dropped his caste, his last name Suri, which sadly my father and their generation again brought it on. So my father became Kulwant Singh Suri again, and I became Navdeep Suri, but he remained Nanak Singh all his life.
One of the first pieces of literature that Nanak Singh did was, in many ways, was seminal and sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
So this was, what we were discussing the other day, that this was really his discovery of Sikhism and of the message of the Sikh gurus. So he wrote this set of hymns or poems in praise of the Sikh gurus. And it's very interesting that each of the poems was in a rag and a tal, which was specified, and some of them were set to tunes of popular songs of that period. And given how the poems were, they became a runaway success and actually pulled him from Peshawar to Amritsar. And when he arrived in Amritsar, he had this reputation. Nanak Singh Kavishar was what he was called, the poet. And in fact, because that collection of poems called Satgur Mehma was so revered, that they also gave him the Takhallus of Pai Nanak Singh, Kavishar, in recognition of his contribution to the religion, I guess. And all before he was 20 years old.
Wow. One of the most amazing things, we were in Colorado for JLF, and the governor had come to do the proclamation, doing a day of JLF in Colorado. And I remember the governor saying to me, because that year we had Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who was our ambassador to Washington, who is a great writer, Ambassador High Commissioner Vikas Swaroop, who wrote Slumdog Millionaire, and the governor turned around and said to me, "So what is it with these diplomats from India who are always writing and are writers?" So Navdeep, what got you to translate this?
Well, I think diplomats are trained to write fiction in our reports to government. Right? All is well is often the. I mean, we deal with words, right? And words matter, and the sanctity of words matters. But I think for me, the incentive for translation was really from my mother, who really pushed me into it, saying that I, as a teacher of Punjabi language, not just as Nanak Singh's daughter-in-law, can vouch for a fact that you don't understand, which is that your grandfather was a genius of a storyteller. And you have a responsibility, because you're the only one in the family whose English is little tic-tac, to kind of take a shot at it. And that was Pavitra Papi, the novel that I first translated some 20 years back, I guess, when I was in London.
Any of you seen the movie Pavitra Papi? Yeah, so that was based on the novel.
And then, another one and another one. And particularly, I think the last two that I did on the partition really are terrific stories, again through an eyewitness who saw a lot of the turmoil firsthand in 1947. And both books are on those very eventful, traumatic first 8 months of 1947.
They're not just terrific, but they're terrifying, because when you read the books, and I think one of the editions is available here, you'll see how history, sadly, continues to repeat itself, because nobody really reads history. So you do the same things, you other the same communities, the same people, and you make them somebody else, and you hate them. Navdeep, Khooni Vaisakhi, what a seminal work, and thank you for translating it. I mean, I had no access, or people like me have no access to writing in other languages, because we only have English and maybe our mother tongue. And it was, when I read it the first time, when he sent me the draft copy, I was totally bowled over, because it provided you the context in which this particular incident or horrific massacre happened. It set the scene, it told you what happened in the massacre, and it gave you the aftermath. Navdeep, set the scene for us. I mean, why did Nanak Singh write it? What happened? And give us a little sense into leading up to what happened at Jallianwala Bagh.
So I think, as I said, Nanak Singh comes to Amritsar in 1918. He's young, he's active, lands up at Jallianwala Bagh on the 13th of April 1919 with two of his friends to protest against the Rowlatt Act, which has got much of the country exercised at that point of time. Gandhiji has given a call for a hartal throughout the country, a strike call throughout the country. And things are moving fairly...
Tell us a little bit about the act. Why?
Rapidly. So, you know, the context historically was that the First World War was from 1914 to 1918. Punjab contributed 700,000 soldiers for the war effort, and some 70,000 died in fighting a battle that wasn't theirs in distant lands in Europe, in Middle East, and elsewhere. And there was an expectation that post the war, the Draconian Defense of India Act, which was really an Emergency Powers Act, would be set aside, and a degree of self-rule would be given to the people of India. Instead of that, Sir Sidney Rowlatt was commissioned by the government to come and draft a new piece of legislation, supposedly to fight sedition. And it was called an anti-sedition law. And what really it meant was that the public's civil rights were completely squashed. And the operative line that people used to say was, no dalil, no wakil, no appeal. You couldn't argue against it, you couldn't have a lawyer against it, and you certainly had no recourse.
Some of our laws have come back to being that, but hey.
And you know, there was, when it was submitted, the bills were submitted to the legislature, all of the Indian members from Jinnah to Madan Mohan Malviya walked out in protest. And Gandhiji wrote a final desperate letter to the Viceroy saying, don't do it. And they did it anyway. So that was the atmosphere of protest, and Amritsar certainly was aggrieved that, you know, having sent so many people for the war effort. But the other thing, you know, when about this poem, which I find striking about this ballad, is not only that it's a very contemporaneous historical account of that first fortnight of April 1919, almost telling you day by day how the mood of the city shifts and what's happening in the city, but also my grandfather's sense, his belief that this ballad that he's writing is for posterity. It's almost, you hear those lest we forget words throughout. And maybe, Sanjoy, if you agree, I'll start off with the opening section, which is really an invocation to the 10th Sikh Guru, Guru Granth Sahib, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and it starts off, I'll just say a few lines in Punjabi and give you a little bit of the English context. Kalgi walade Shahanshah Pita mere, charna teriyan te namaskar Satguru, tu hai pusht panah nimaniyan da, deen bandhu tu vich sansar Satguru. So he starts with this, O Father mine with the turban plumed, I bow at thy feet, my divine Guru, Messiah of the meek, Savior of the poor, my divine Guru. And he goes on to say, grant me thy cup of love and blessings, uplift my spirits, my divine Guru. Let my pen fly across the pages to tell this tale, my divine Guru, of innocent souls laying down their lives for our nation's sake, my divine Guru. To pen the portrait of those departed ones, grant me the strength, my divine Guru, to remind my people across India, lest we forget their sacrifice, my divine Guru. To write the saga of our heroes such, your disciple is ready, my divine Guru. Do help me complete this mission of mine. Nanak Singh beseeches, O my divine Guru. Harpreet. I should just say, what you're going to listen is the first rendition of this poem in the United States for an album that is now on Spotify and on iTunes, and maybe we can call it the premiere of his album in the US.
पिता मेरे चरना तेरे आत नमस्कार सतगुर बेड़ी पाप दे नाल भरपूर होके पई डोलदी है मजदार सतगुर करके मेहर इस डुबदी जावदी नू तक्का मार के लाना पार सतगुर भर के प्रेम दा एक चादेह प्याला जिस दे पींदियां ही चढ़े खुमार सतगुर चले नाल सुरूर मसरूर होके कलम दास दी तेज रफ्तार सतगुर ओ दसे हाल अज उन्हां बेदोसियां दा जेड़े देस पर होए निसार सतगुर दास्तान शहीदां दी लिखणे नू दास आपदा होया त्यार सतगुर करके मेहर इस डुबदी जावदी नू तक्का मार के लाना पार सतगुर तोड़ चाड़ना अपनी मेहर करके नानक सिंह करे पुकार सतगुर थैंक यू
Harpreet, and this particular album has been commissioned by the Nanak Singh Foundation, which Navdeep and Mani set up, and we're absolutely delighted, Harpreet, that you were able to join us here in Seattle for this premiere. Thank you. That was just beautiful. Thank you.
Worth the wait.
Thank you so much.
Navdeep, before we get straight to Jallianwala Bagh, translation is such a complex piece of work. Sometimes it's lost in translation, but sometimes it creates a new work. You struggled because this particular piece, you had to look at the rhyme, you had to look at the meter, and then you had to find the appropriate words. Tell us your journey in trying to crack this very difficult dirge.
I had no prior experience in translation. I wasn't a student of literature. My sum total of literary oeuvre was the dry and boring reports to government. But I think the key issue for me that I was grappling with when we embarked on this journey was really, you know that you have to maintain that fidelity to the original in terms of meaning and context, but can you also retain that fidelity in terms of the cadence and rhyme? Because you know as a translator that that's going to be a double bind for you. You're really limited in terms of the vocabulary and whatever is available to you. One of our common friends, Pavan Verma, who's translated a lot of Gulzar Saab's poetry, does it in free verse. And I looked at his poems as for some inspiration. And it didn't quite gel. I tried my hand at doing free verse, but to the extent these poems are meant to be recited in a certain way, that oral quality of it, I thought, was the tonality was being sacrificed. Yes, so while I was grappling with this, there's this marvelous book by Douglas Hofstadter about the poetry of, about the music of poetry. And one of the sections in that book was, he took one of Pushkin's works and he had 4 translators, translations of Pushkin in 4 different quadrants, the same section. And he asked the reader, which one do you like most? And you could see how each translator had approached that particular piece of verse very differently in terms of how they handled it. But each one had strayed true to the cadence of the of Pushkin's original. And for me, I think that meant that I've got to somehow, anyhow, retain that. And eventually, you know, you find some devices, get a little bit creative, you still make sure you keep your eyes on that thing that you will not sacrifice on the meaning. And eventually, some moments of inspiration and it gets done.
Beautiful. Jallianwala Bagh, people have gathered in protest the previous day. There's been a firing. They've taken the bodies to be burnt, bodies to be buried. They've crossed the bridge. Tell us what happens post that.
So I think in terms of the sequence of the events, as I said, on the 6th of April, there's a hartal in Amritsar. Most shops are closed. People are trying to figure out what to do. And then on the 9th of April is the festival of Ram Navami, which is celebrated with a lot of fervor by the Hindus and the Muslims, in quite a remarkable show of unity between the faiths. The British get spooked by that show of unity, and both the leaders of the Hindu and Sikh communities in Amritsar are arrested on the morning of the 10th. The news of that spreads through the city, and a deputation goes across the old bridge that connected the old walled city with the civil lines area. They want to give a petition to the deputy commissioner to release the leaders. And there's firing on the group that has gone to deliver the petition. They are told you are not allowed to cross the bridge. And some 27, 28 people are killed on the 10th of April, which is something which has often been forgotten as we study that period. When this news goes through the city, there's a mob that gathers and it burns down the town hall and several British institutions, including banks, in Amritsar. The British react by getting General Dyer and they basically give the governance of the city from the deputy commissioner to the army. So it's like martial law being imposed. people, on the 11th of April, there are these massive funeral processions where all of these people who've been killed are being buried or cremated. And again, we see quite a significant show of unity between the faiths. In fact, one of the lines in that particular section of the poem, which my grandfather narrates, is that you had this extraordinary sight of Hindus chanting Ya Hussein and Muslims chanting Ram Ram as they go on that funeral procession. And that takes us to the 12th of April. People are still now thinking what next to do, and they decide that let's get together at Jallianwala Bagh. And so I'll read the section which really, it's a very vivid, very graphic section about the 20,000 odd people who had assembled in Jallianwala Bagh, largely to protest against the Rowlatt Act. And General Dyer's arrival and the firing, and then the aftermath of that firing. I'll read out a little bit, maybe in Punjabi, in English, and then it'll be over to Harpreet. ठीक वक्त 5:30 ਵਜੇ ਦਾ ਸੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਮ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੋਏ ਕਈ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਲੀਡਰ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦਾ ਦੁੱਖ ਫਰੋਲਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਲੈਕਚਰ ਦੇਵਦੇ ਸਨ ਵਾਰੋ ਵਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੀਵਣਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਔਖਾ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਏ ਕੇ ਕਰੀਏ ਪੁਕਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕੋਈ ਸੁਣਦਾ ਸੁਝਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਦਬੀਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਡਾਢੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਲਾਚਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ 5:30 sharp the clock had struck. Thousands gathered in the Bagh, my friends. Leaders came to lament the nation's woes, taking turns to speak out loud, my friends. Voiced grievance, hardship, anger, sorrow, saying no one listens to us, my friends. What can we do? What options left? Can't see any ray of light, my friends. Those words forlorn, they barely voiced, came soldiers thundering down, my friends. At Dyer's command, those Gorkha troops gathered in a formation tight, my friends. Under tyrants' orders, they opened fire straight into innocent hearts, my friends. And fire and fire and fire they did. Some thousands of bullets were shot, my friends. Like searing hail, they felled our youth, a tempest not seen before, my friends. Riddled chests and bodies slid to the ground, each one a target large, my friends. Haunting cries for help did rend the sky, smoke rose from smoldering guns, my friends. Just a sip of water was all they sought. Valiant youth lay dying in the dust, my friends. That narrow lane to enter the Bagh, sealed off on Dyer's command, my friends. No exit, no escape, no way out was left, making Bagh a deathly trap, my friends. A fortunate few somehow survived, while most died then and there, my friends. Some ran with bullets ripping their chest, stumbling to their painful end, my friends. Others caught the bullet while running away, dropping lifeless in awkward heaps, my friends. In minutes, the Bagh, so strewn with corpses, none knew just who was who, my friends. Many of them did look like Sikhs. Amid Hindus and Muslims, plenty, my friends. In prime of their youth, our brave hearts lay, gasping for one last breath, my friends. Long hair lay matted in blood and grime. In slumber deep they sleep, my friends, says Nanak Singh, who knows their state, but God, the one and only, my friends. And then it goes on to describe a little bit about the aftermath. With faces drawn and muffled sobs, they sift through the corpses in silent fear. Like moth on a flame, hearts burn to ashes on seeing the fate of sons so dear. Ah, the pain of losing a child so precious. Like heart is pierced with dagger or spear. Grief inconsolable melts toughest of souls. Even faces most stoic shed tear after tear. Clutching lifeless bodies of precious sons, parents moan abject horrors of the day. My child, wake up just once more. What makes you sleep in a place so grey? You left us alone for a voyage so long. No goodbye you bid, no farewell did you say. Couldn't you wait for a little bit while longer to let us join you on your eternal way? If time indeed had come to part, your parents could join without delay. Says Nanak Singh, you can't fight fate. When the master orders, you just obey.
ਠੀਕ ਵਕਤ ਸਾਡੇ 5 ਵਜੇ ਦਾ ਸੀ। ਲੋਕ ਜਮਾ ਹੋਏ ਕਈ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਿਉਣਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਔਖਾ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕਰੀਏ ਪੁਕਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕੋਈ ਸੁਝਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਦਬੀਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਢਾਡੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਲਾਚਾਰ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਅਜੇ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਤਦਬੀਰ ਮੂੰਹ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਸੀ ਉਧਰ ਫੌਜ ਨੇ ਧੂੜ ਤੁਮਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਦੇਰ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਫੌਜ ਗੋਰਖੇ ਦੀ ਜਨਰਲ ਡਾਇਰ ਨੇ ਅੱਗਾ ਵਧਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਦੇਰ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਫੌਜ ਗੋਰਖੇ ਦੀ ਜਨਰਲ ਡਾਇਰ ਨੇ ਅੱਗਾ ਵਧਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਪਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਲੋਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਢੇਰ ਲੱਗ ਗਏ ਦੇਰ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਫੌਜ ਗੋਰਖੇ ਦੀ ਜਨਰਲ ਡਾਇਰ ਨੇ ਅੱਗਾ ਵਧਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਉਹ ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਲੋਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਢੇਰ ਲੱਗ ਗਏ ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਲੋਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਢੇਰ ਲੱਗ ਗਏ ਹੀ ਲੋਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਢੇਰ ਲੱਗ ਗਏ ਕੋਈ ਸਕੇ ਨਾ ਮੂਲ ਪਛਾਣ ਉੱਥੇ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਵੇ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਵੇ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨ ਉੱਤੇ ਸੋਹਣੇ ਸੁਰਮੇ छैल छबिलड़ जी है तड़प दे शेर ਜਵਾਨ ਉਥੇ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਬਾਤ ਕੋਈ, ਉਹ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਬਾਤ ਕੋਈ, ਰਾਖਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਭਗਵਾਨ ਉੱਥੇ। ਰੋਂਦੇ ਪਿੱਟਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਸੰਬੰਧੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਢੂੰਡਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੁਰਦਿਆਂ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ, ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ, ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਮੋਏ ਲਾਡਲੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਯਾਰੋ ਸੀਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਟਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ, ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ, ਹਾਂ ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ, ਨੀਰ ਉਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਅੱਖੀਓਂ ਚੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ। ਮੇਰੇ ਲਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਜਾਗ ਛੇਤੀ, ਮੇਰੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਲਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਮਾਰੀਆਂ ਜਾਗ ਛੇਤੀ, ਜੰਗਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਾਨੂੰ ਸੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ, ਬਿਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਿਆਂ ਲੰਮੜੇ ਰਾਹ ਪਿਓ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਕੇ ਵਿਦਾ ਹੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ। ਓ ਰੱਤਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਉਡੀਕ ਲੈਂਦੋ ਹੋ, ਰੱਤਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਉਡੀਕ ਲੈਂਦੋ ਹੋ, ਘੜੀ ਦੋ ਘੜੀ ਚਾਈ ਖਲੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ। ਜੇਕਰ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਤੇਰਾ ਕਾਲ ਬੱਚਾ, ਜੇਕਰ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਤੇਰਾ ਕਾਲ ਬੱਚਾ, ਮੈਂ ਬਾਪ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਚਾ ਢੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ। ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਪਰ ਲਿਖੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੌਣ ਮਿਟੇ, ਉਹ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਪਰ ਲਿਖੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੌਣ ਮਿਟੇ ਇਹ ਹੁਕਮ ਕਰਤਾਰ ਦਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੀ।
Harpreet. Totally beautiful. You can stand up now, but we're going to run short of time, so we'll do it at the end.
Thank you, thank you.
Just to say, if anybody wants Harpreet to come back to America, he will be on tour. Harpreet's manager, Raj, is at the back. Raj, please wave your hand. He's one of our colleagues from Teamwork, so you can get in touch with him if Bellevue ever wants to get him back as part of his thing. Navdeep, they've given us time, but I just want to quickly ask you, Nanak Singh survived Jallianwala Bagh.
So he survived. The stories that we heard was that he'd gone with his two friends, both were killed. There was a stampede when the fire started. He was knocked down on the ground, unconscious in the stampede. Left amongst the dead, like in a pile of bodies. And he walked away from there. We don't know what kind of trauma he underwent, but he wrote this long poem, first published in early 1920, banned by the British, confiscated, all copies more or less lost, until 6 decades later when we found it through a series of coincidences.
And what happened to Dwyer and Dyer?
Dyer...
and just make the distinction, please, for everyone.
So General Dyer was the brigadier in the army cantonment in Jalandhar, about 50 miles from Amritsar, and he was brought in with his troops to restore law and order, as the British said, and they killed 1,000 people. There was the Hunter Commission of Inquiry, and that was a bit of a whitewash, but even that determined that 379 people were killed according to their minimal estimates in those 15 minutes. General Dyer was asked pointedly by one of the Indian members of the commission, what would you have done had you been able to bring your armored personal carrier with the machine gun into the Bagh, because he couldn't, the entrance was too narrow. And he said, I probably would have. So there was no remorse. And yet, when so he was removed from his position and he went back to London. And there was a fundraising campaign for him in the parliament to celebrate a man who had killed so many. But in his own mind, I think he felt that he had been dishonored and he retreated to his village and few years later died pretty unsung death from arteriosclerosis and basically also drinking too much and killing his liver. And his wife burnt all papers related to him. She didn't want any trace left of his history. So there's a wonderful book called The Butcher of Amritsar. And he's tried, the author has tried to piece his life together and says that he wasn't able to find very much. Historians think that the real perpetrator was Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer, an ICS officer who was the governor effectively of Punjab and based out of Lahore. He's the one who thought, and we know much more about his account of it, he thought that the signs of rebellion that Amritsar was demonstrating were signs of 1857 uprising all over again, and he wanted to nip the evil in the bud, as he says. And that's why he brought in Reginald Dyer with his troops. Dwyer finished his term, went back and was really celebrated as the savior of Punjab by particularly the conservative sides of the British establishment. And it wasn't until 1940 that gentleman called Shahid Udham Singh, who had been a teenager at the time of the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, makes his way from Punjab to East Africa, from East Africa into the Ghadar movement in San Francisco, from San Francisco to New York, and eventually, with a Spanish wife acquired in the process, etc., makes his way to London, by which time he has acquired the trappings of an English gentleman, and waits 21 years till he gets the opportunity in Caxton Hall to accost Michael Dyer and use literally a country-made pistol to fire and kill him, and then surrender himself, saying, "I've achieved the mission that I came for."
What a story. How many of you have been to Amritsar or Jallianwala Bagh? Some. Navdeep, when I first came, and it wasn't very long ago that I first went to Amritsar because we started a new festival called the Sacred Amritsar because Mani and Navdeep were in Amritsar. I went to Jallianwala Bagh and I was quite surprised because I saw all of these very shiny, happy faces on the frieze of the wall going in. And then I went in and I saw this beautiful, undulating, green, carpeted lawn, quite different from what I read in the poem. Why do we need to preserve and conserve our heritage monuments to tell their story?
So trust Sanjoy to put me in a spot. So I was really angry when, in the name of commemorating the centenary of Jallianwala Bagh, in the name of modernizing the facilities, setting up a new interpretation center, the company that was hired to do this changed the basic character of the place. And I wrote a very angry piece in the Tribune at that time, citing my objection, but also quoting from Khooni Vaisakhi to support my arguments that what had been done to Jallianwala Bagh was ahistorical. It was, almost a desecration of a site that is sacred in our memory. And I think we maybe perhaps need to think back why it is so important. Ramchandra Guha in his book on Gandhi says that this is the point where Gandhi, who had been a staunch British loyalist, became an implacable enemy of the British. This is the moment where Rabindranath Tagore renounces his knighthood, and I'd encourage you to read his letter with which he renounces knighthood, saying, how could the British do this? And these were friends of Britain. And so it's seen as a turning point in the British rule of India. It was downhill pretty much from there on. And what have we done to it? As you enter the Bagh today, the entrance has been widened. You see murals on both sides. And these murals are dressed in costumes that are, again, ahistorical. They show happy faces going to celebrate Vaisakhi, which is wrong historically because Amritsar was under curfew. These were not happy people going to celebrate the Vaisakhi festival. These were people there for the purpose of protesting against the Rowlatt Act, defying the curfew that was in place in Amritsar. Mani and I were together. We looked at the interpretation center. We went around. Jallianwala Bagh was a killing field for two reasons, and it was chosen for that. One was that it had only one narrow entry point, which was also the exit, what I read also from the poem. The second was, it was kind of recessed dust bowl almost, with a couple of shrubs and one solitary tree and a well. There was nowhere to hide, there was nowhere to run when Dyer came with his troops. Today, that bowl has been converted to lovely landscaped hillocks and hedges, and soldiers sort of from those hedges carved out, sort of trimmed to make soldiers who have guns in their hands. It's Disneyfication of a sacred site. And we've seen Holocaust memorials, we've seen other places. You know, there's a way to preserve history which somewhere the contractors seem to have abandoned. And for me, the final sort of blow was, as Mani and I were leaving towards the entry point, which was the exit point also, which is part of our hardwired historical memory, growing up in that city. The security guard says, no, not this way. The exit is over there. And I said, what? And they've created a nice, big, broad exit into a different bazaar to make it convenient for the visitors. And so, yeah, I feel very strongly, but fortunately there is a movement which has registered its protests. Because the Jallianwala Bagh is, among other things, it's unique because the chairman of the trust is the Prime Minister of the day, whoever it is. And so the matters reach the top, and I believe that some kind of a review is underway to restore its original character, but let's see when that happens.
For many of you know, whether it's Jallianwala Bagh or whether it's the famine in Bengal, much of this evidence today is, we know because it's recorded, of course, by the British, and you can get it in places like the British Library. So those of you who think that 3.5 million people, for example, died in the Bengal famine, it was 75 million people who finally died across all of that area. And what the British then did continues to unfold, as we are seeing, in Israel and Palestine. And much of this will come back to haunt all of us. Not just, so violence does come back, as I said at the opening, and we need to be very conscious of that. And therefore, we need to take responsibility for what we see around us. With that, I'm going to ask Navdeep to end with the last poem and ask Harpreet to sing and maybe give us the context of how you struggled to find the word for this last translation.
Sanjoy, one just an aside, when I was doing research on this period and trying to understand what was happening in Punjab and generally at that point in time, I was also curious to know who this character Sidney Rowlett was. And purely by accident, trawling the internet, I stumbled on the fact that his great-grandson, Justin Rowlett, had been the BBC correspondent in Delhi. And Justin had, in fact, visited Jallianwala Bagh and written a small piece for the BBC website. And I reached out to Justin and said, this is the project I'm working on. My grandfather was one of the victims. And would you write something for us? So he wrote a beautiful, very moving essay called For the Sins of My Great-Grandfather for the book. And when we were speaking, Justin and I, thanks to Sanjoy, we were all at the British Library, GLF at the British Library in 2019. Justin told me something that he hasn't put in his essay. He said he got a lot of backlash when he published this because his granduncle, who's the elder of the family and the custodian of the family honor and all that, said, you have dishonored the memory of your great-grandfather by writing this empathetic piece. And don't you realize that your great-grandfather was trying to defend the British Empire? And these people who were gathered in Jallianwala Bagh, the civilian, unarmed, peaceful protesters, he described them as no different from today's Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So Justin was telling me, he said, I didn't realize that I had an unreconstructed racist in my family in the year of the Lord 2020 or 2019. Sanjoy, on the last poem, I'm just mindful that, I'd spoken about this on the opening, and do you really want me to?
Just read the last paragraph and Harpreet can conclude because I can see my colleagues waving their hands wildly.
Exactly. So these are little letters or postcards of pain, as I call them, that are at the end of the poem, which are postcards that The ordinary public is writing sort of petitions to the Lord, saying, help us, because we are suffering under the Raj. And sort of in Punjabi, it goes like this: Shahanshah sun lain tusade, Shahanshah sun lain asade, dukhi dilan ne paas tusade, arza aan sunaiyan, chithiyan dardan diyan. Please heed our humble pleas, our Lord. Your helpless folks seek help, our Lord, and so we plead in vain our postcards of pain. And it ends after a number of similar postcards. O Lord, do listen to our prayer, your gentle flocks in utter despair. Their tears flow without restraint, our postcards of pain. Harpreet.
ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਹਿਨਸ਼ਾਹ ਸੁਣ ਲੈਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਦੁਖੀ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਾਸ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਅਰਜ਼ਾਂ ਆਣ ਸੁਣਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਰੌਲਟ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਸੀ ਜਦ ਆਇਆ ਰੌਲਟ ਬਿੱਲ ਜਾ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਹੋਰ ਮੁਸੀਬਤਾਂ ਆਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਡਵਾਇਰ ਹੁਕਮ ਚਲਾਇਆ ਜਿਸਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਤਾਇਆ ਖਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਵਾਂਗ ਕਸਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਹਿਨਸ਼ਾਹ ਸੁਣ ਅਰਜ਼ ਸਾਡੀ ਰਈਅਤ ਢਾਡੀ ਦੁਖੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੀ ਦਿਨ ਦੀ ਸਦਾ ਦੁਹਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਲਿਖ ਸਰਕਾਰੇ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਦਰਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ Thank you.
Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Harpreet,